Lots of people in positions of authority are talking about the need to prepare for war in Europe. How seriously should we take this rhetoric? There's already a war going on in Europe, and has been for nearly 4 years. Fortunately, it hasn't spread since then. But not for lack of Russia trying to spread it. They've been sabotaging Western infrastructure since the time of their invasion of Ukraine. Dude, Putin killed a guy in the UK nearly 20 years ago and didn't admit it but left his calling card as evidence, polonium, his signature kill tactic. Anyone who thinks Putin would ever chill if you didn't confront him is either trolling or naive. There will come a day when Putin chills. Hell, even assume room temperature. But today is not that day. They shot down a passenger plane killing 200. We have proof it was them. No consequences. MH17. 11 years. And basically back to the Soviet Union, counting Moldova. That was part of their plan, was connecting the geography with the separatist movement there. Yeah, there's truth in that. It hasn't been a shooting war all of that time. Only because Russia was meeting its goals without shooting for part of that time. Actually, it's been going on since 2014. The Russians invaded Crimea with their little green men, and after starting a civil war in the Donbass and Luhansk, and when their proxy forces were about to be defeated, they invaded. So yes, Putin wants it all. He views himself as a czar and will invade the Baltic nations, Poland, and so on. War has come to Europe and the Europeans need to wake up to that, because Trump's USA will only come to help Putin. With Russia attacking a country near EU and the US being an unreliable ally, if an ally at all with current admin, it makes sense to prepare. Learning from the past, not appeasing dictators and not doing the "it won't happen to me" thing. The US are now openly trying to dismantle the EU, to make Europe weaker and more vulnerable, while also openly renouncing centuries-old Western values. They are hostile and should be seen as such before it's too late. It boggles my mind how the US can be so fixated on foreign meddling in their elections yet openly say that they plan to influence elections in Europe. Yeah. Putin knows he has until the end of Trump's presidency to attack Europe. After that, someone less manipulatable will be in office, so time is ticking and he knows it. That last sentence is a big assumption that might come to bite us all in the ass. You seriously think J.D. Vance will be less manipulatable than Trump? Once he's POTUS, it will basically be like Putin is POTUS. Russia has been trying to conquer 5 villages and 5 barns in Ukraine for 4 years now. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't underestimate the dictator and so on. But some dude on Reddit showed a great article about it. I've read this and I fucking agree with everything written. This is an excellent analysis of the real threat from Russia. To all that is written in the article, I would also add that Putin is not getting younger over the years. I really think that this is a good and comprehensive answer about whether there is a threat or not, from a person who has really analyzed the events at the battlefield. https:/www.surst.org/n/horizon/horizon summer 2025 issue no 31 / Is Russia really a threat to Europe? With all due respect to geopolitics Mads Mikkelsen there, Russia isn't just fighting a shooting war in Ukraine. They're stoking unrest and civil strife everywhere with the goal of getting their candidates into office. On that front they're doing quite well. https://n/wikipedia.org/wiki/foundations of geopolitics, Profs D1. This is widely regarded as Putin's to-do list. Anything on here like jumping out at all? Do you honestly think there would be so many pro-Russian parties and governments, Hungary, Slovakia, and now Czech Republic, without Russia interfering in financing? A war doesn't have to mean Russian tanks in Berlin. Putin dismantles the EU from within and now the US is teaming up with him. Take it seriously enough to pay attention, not seriously enough to lose sleep. It's governments shaking people out of complacency and justifying defense spending. If war were actually imminent, the tone would be very different and a lot quieter. The tone would be very different and a lot quieter. In what way? I guess, similar to how Ukraine downplayed the few days/weeks before the war to not scare general population and avoid mass exodus. So many NATO countries suddenly increasing spending by this much in coordination doesn't happen if they don't know something specific. There is clearly intelligence, as several intelligence agencies now have said too, that Russia is preparing to invade the Baltics in a few years. When war is imminent, governments are not quiet but doing everything they can to prepare the population. As several intelligence agencies now have said too, that Russia is preparing to invade the Baltics in a few years. They've been saying that forever. When war is imminent, it's clearly not imminent. And combating Russian and Chinese online propaganda efforts aimed at discouraging European populations from their needed increased defense spending. One should always be prepared for war. I do not believe war is imminent. The stronger EU becomes, the less likely there will be war. Si vis pacem, para bellum. Tra misu, tagliatelle. Yup, don't make yourself an easy target. I feel like the last time there wasn't a need to prepare was in the 1920s with maybe the late 1990s. Especially as Russia is becoming weaker constantly. People should be prepared in the same ways they'd prepare themselves for a bad storm or other natural disaster. Being self-sufficient for a few days can save lives. In addition, be prepared to relocate, with vital documents, pets, medicines, etc., and familiarizing oneself with what evacuation plans and routes authorities have planned out. That said, as a civilian that's about the extent you can do, so worrying beyond that is pointless. Bonus, you'll also be prepared for natural disasters. Most Europeans are not used to prepare for natural disasters like a lot of Americans, almost never used to be thing here until recent years. Yeah, I came to say the same thing. Natural disasters are a very recent and very local problem. We don't really get heavy earthquakes, tornadoes, or tsunamis in most parts of Europe. I even got laughed at for heaving a several-week supply of food. People called me a prepper for having a couple dozens of cans in my basement. Seriously. The EU needs to prepare for war, but by preparing for war it will make war less likely. Most importantly, it needs to adjust to be more independent. Hostile nations like the USA shouldn't be in the EU's military supply chain. It's kind of funny to me how much this also applies to climate change and biodiversity crisis. By working to lessen the impact, it actually works. It's also kind of scary to realize that instead of doing anything to lessen the impact, the world as a collective is making it worse at a faster and faster pace. If you want peace, prepare for war. Don't forget that preparing for war most of the time means build up enough power to stop your megalomaniac neighbor from attacking you in the first place. Even today Russia would stand no chance in a direct, non-nuclear, confrontation with the EU and NATO, even without the US, but the less we prepare the more expensive in terms of lives lost a potential war would become. Poland could probably whoop the shit out of Russia by themselves right now. That said, NATO absolutely needs to increase defense spending. I doubt there's any real threat. But the threat of America no longer being an ally is real, so prepare for war is really more. We're going to have to do this alone, so we gotta prepare now. Very serious. Have you been unaware of the largest war, since World War II, already happening in Europe? I take it seriously in a way I do something with it, but at the same time don't worry about it. It's good to be prepared for what-if situations. Better over-prepared than under-prepared. Though, where I live a lot of people think it's a waste of money and are angry we are asked to be self-reliant for the first 72 hours if disaster strikes. But I believe that the same people would also be angry if the government didn't warn us and prepared for war when things really go down. Every country should be prepared for war. Many politicians have been asleep at the wheel on this front for decades in Europe and they're finally waking up. There are several regions in Russia, such as parts of Siberia, that are increasingly viewing the war with suspicion. The population of that country would not be prepared for an even more complex war involving all of Europe, in which case the use of atomic weapons would be reconsidered. However, it seems to me that the European Union is experiencing some concern regarding its military position due to the problems the US is facing, which raises questions about what to do if the EU, the UK, and other parties are left without their main military ally. I don't know about war, but what I do know is that about a month before we went into the first lockdown, I was working for a healthcare company and we could not buy masks and gloves anywhere. My office was round the corner from the Scottish Water HQ, so I went over to see if I could get PPE from them or find out who their supplier was. They told me it was impossible to get it just now as the UK government had requisitioned it all. A month later we were locked down and were awash with PPE. People in some places do know what's going on, so nothing would surprise me for the future now. LOL. 2020, the year where people believed the world would be united to fight this new virus. So naive. Seriously, because if we don't show strength and put down boundaries and enforce, we'll get walked over just like interpersonal relation in everyday life. Russia tested our reactions with Ukraine, and now they're doing the same with the Baltics. Putin funded Brexit, tearing the country apart and driving a wedge between our nearest neighbors. He's now trying to get his side piece Farage to stir up the idiots into driving Britain fully into the dirt. Britain has a decent military and a history of protecting our European neighbors. Even though realistically we were always second fiddle to the US. He killed dissidents on British soil and acts with complete impunity. With America in the hands of the Great Orange Diddler and Britain trying its best to shoot itself in the foot at every turn, Europe's safety net for the last 70 years is looking shaky. The only hope comes from the fact that Russia has failed to take Ukraine, despite overwhelming numerical superiority. Germany would likely be an even harder nut to crack. The other hope is that, like all people, he's mortal, and one day we all get some news, along with a few others, that will lead to record champagne sales globally.